Well, greetings and good Monday morning, this 15th of April, 2024, still the third decade of the 21st century. If for some reason you're new to my channel and you don't understand why I say that, I do that on purpose to sort of try to hyper expose the fact that it is indeed the third decade of the 21st century. And what sort of things are we talking about? What sort of things are we dealing with in the third decade of the 21st century, as opposed to where scholars had predicted us to be? So with that in mind, let's move forward. I know it's been a hot minute. I haven't necessarily been neglecting the channel. It's just I've been busy, and then on top of which, I've been trying really hard to avoid repetition, to avoid repeating myself, and trying to find different things to talk about, but it seems like the same things always come up, just in a different light. Also, this particular channel here, out of the two channels I have, is reserved strictly for like my socio-political content, if you will. So to kind of give you a rundown of what's happened since I posted my last video, a buddy of mine had a birthday party. He's a leap year baby, so it was kind of significant that we were able to celebrate his birthday, since it only happens once every 4 years. In doing so, we had a gathering of people where one of our friends is probably a little more left of center, and I often question whether he's left of center on his own, or if he's left of center because of his wife, or a combination of both. None of which is wrong or bad. We still love him. It's just every once in a while, I guess you could say, when alcohol gets involved, he wants to talk about things that apparently nobody else does. But I don't mind. I sincerely don't mind entertaining it, because I feel like if we don't have these conversations with people we don't always agree with, then we resort to our echo chambers. And the short version is this. During one of our conversations, he said that I say and post a lot of right-wing things, to which my response was, well, what exactly makes it, or makes me, right-wing? And I had to explain to him, when you add wing to the end of it, you're using coded language to imply a sense of extremism. By saying I'm right-wing, you're saying I have some extreme views. I have some extreme opinions, where I don't know that I do. I mean, a lot of times when I do get on Facebook, I'm just sharing or commenting on memes or things of that nature. If you're not familiar, the quick 30-minute spiel is, I despise the Democratic Party, but I despise the Democratic Party not just emotionally. I despise them for legacy. Essentially, they were the party that succeeded from the Union and formed the Confederacy. They're the party of slavery. They're the party of Jim Crow and segregation. They're the party against civil rights. They're the party against the voting rights. They're the party that essentially founded abortion, as in with the strictest intent to abort babies of color. It started primarily on the Native American reservations, and then migrated into the black communities, where I want to say, I could be wrong, but I want to say her name was Margaret Sanger, and she was a lifelong Democrat, and her goal was to essentially get rid of children of color, you know, to try to purify the country with whiteness by eliminating non-white babies. And I could have that name wrong, so don't quote me on that. I should probably look that up. So I despise the Democratic Party. We also fought a civil war in order to unify the country and sort of abolish an ideology that was upheld by the Democratic Party and subsequently the Confederacy. And yet we allowed the Democratic Party to survive. I mean, we fought an entire world war where between fascism, socialism, ethnocentrism, and imperialism were some of the main topics. And we defeated, of all things, the Nazi Party, the Fascist Party of Italy, and the Socialist Party of Spain, in order to preserve a sense of liberty. And we were all combined together on that. And the Nazi Party, as far as I know, does not exist, but the Democratic Party still exists to this day. Am I going to say that the modern day Democrats represent everything of the Confederacy? No. But with that in mind, and this is what I told my friend, only one political party has ever in any way, shape, or form, through policy, through stance, through ideology, has ever been anti-American in its current form, and that's the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has always been anti-everything we stand for. They have tried for at least going on almost 2 centuries now to usher in some form of a new world order. And when left in charge, that's exactly what they do. But again, this goes into something else. So my buddy, based on his faith and his belief, not religion, but faith in topics, belief in concepts, made the comment that I'm right-wing, using the word wing to accentuate some form of extremism. And I've long said that one of the problems we run into is faith and belief. When you commit to believing in something and you have faith in that something and thus believe that it is right and you are right, it can be very difficult to shake people free of that. And in the short, somewhat 5-minute exchange that we had, I tried to tell him, I was like, look, that doesn't mean I'm a card-carrying Republican. That doesn't mean that by virtue of being anti-Democrat, I'm subsequently and automatically a card-carrying Republican. I was like, I'm probably more of a traditional liberal. I'm probably more center than anything else. But you said I'm right-wing because what? I like the Second Amendment. I want the government fearful of its citizens because the government is elected by its citizens, and therefore we should have the right to protect and defend ourselves against a government that tries to overextend its authority and its boundaries. Absolutely. You know, I look at the modern day Democratic Party and how they're weaponizing, you know, judicial processes and judicial organizations like the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigations to go against their political enemies. That's exactly what happened in places like Communist China, Communist Russia, Nazi Germany, Mussolini's Italy, Socialist Spain. You know, everywhere throughout the world, that's what these dictatorial parties have done, is they've tried to increase the power and authority of the government body and establishment, increase the size and subsequently power and authority of the government establishment, and persecute, silence, and if not imprison their dissidents. And only one political party is currently doing that here in the United States, and that's the Democratic Party. Do I believe turnaround should be fair play? Absolutely. I believe that the Republicans should be free and allowed to do the exact same thing, only within what is legally permissible. If there are elected officials that can be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that they've done things illegal, to include downright anti-American, they should be dealt with accordingly through the appropriate legal channels. And I don't mean unnecessarily persecuted. I mean, if, quote-unquote, the squad is been found guilty of anything, then the squad should be dealt with through the legal system because of having done things illegally. Real quick, pause for a second. I'm going to apologize. I changed my background with the werewolf, and I'm too cheap to pay additional money to get that watermark removed, so I apologize in advance, but I digress. And then equally enough, some things were said about my buddy later on. I had my birthday Saturday, and I had a little, you know, get together with whoever could show up, and of those that showed up, I heard some things, some somewhat disturbing things, where apparently our mutual friend essentially was saying some off-color things and upsetting people and things, and then was also caught attempting to liberate or proliferate items that were not given or belonging to him. And all I could think of is like, well, that's classic left. You feel a sense of entitlement, so therefore you're entitled to take whatever the hell you want. You feel a sense of entitlement because you've been told that you're a victim, and as a victim you deserve to take what you want. And I'm like, well, I don't know that I want to apply that to my friend, but it certainly is a bit disturbing that our friend was doing this. It seems a bit oddly inappropriate that he'd be doing this. Maybe it's just a one-off, you know, and I think that's an adult way of looking at it versus attributing it to his potential socio-political beliefs that he's a wrongdoer. In addition, since my last video, the truth is I actually recorded a video, but I never got around to posting it because I wasn't thrilled with the direction it went. But since the last video I put online, in addition to my buddy's birthday party, my family and I also recognized the 9th anniversary of the passing of my son. It's the last couple of years, if not the last few years, have been very, I guess, difficult would be the best way to put it, because my son, when he passed away, was only 7 years, 7 months, and 11 days old. That's not much. That's not a lot of time for a child to live and then subsequently leave this world. Parents are not supposed to bury their children. Children are supposed to bury their parents. It's as I've said numerous times in the past, it's an extraordinary event that normally you think is reserved for extraordinary people, and we consider ourselves rather vanilla. Not in a self-deprecating way, just, we're not that special. These things shouldn't happen to us, but it did. So we paid homage to that, and not only that, but because he was only 7 years, 7 months, and 11 days old, when I say the 9th anniversary, that means 9 years have passed since we lost him, which, pardon me for stating the obvious, all right, I'm not trying to insult anybody, but that means he's been gone longer than he was with us. Meaning the short time that we got to enjoy him in our lives, that we got to be his parents, he has now been gone longer than he was with us. And tragically, by what would have been his 17th birthday, we will have lived in this house longer than he was alive, which astonishingly enough is the longest I've ever lived in any one place. In my 48 years on this earth, I have never lived in any one physical location for as long as I've lived here, and that's kind of remarkable in itself. As far as why I've had a hard time posting, when I think back to what my friends said and some of the things that he was hinting towards, it just gets me back to, it feels like repetition. We have a group of people that believe in one thing and believe that they are right and believe that they are just and that everybody else is wrong, and then equally an opposite. And the one thing I had to do was recognize that if I can believe, if I can have faith that what I think is right and what I think is wrong is justified, and that I am a good person, I go to work, I pay my taxes, etc., why can there not exist an equal and opposite faction of people that just think and believe differently, that have different ideologies and beliefs? And then what I think about is when I used to live up north in the Chicagoland area, and how many of my friends from high school are more than likely Democrats by default because that's just the way it is. They probably haven't put much thought into it. They probably haven't given it much consideration other than, well, my neighbors vote Democrat, so therefore I'm a Democrat, because most of them could care less about guns. They're not, where they live, it's not a big deal. It's not really part of the culture. So it's probably not a big deal there. Where they live, they probably feel a sense of guilt and shame for what the South did. The legacy of the Confederacy, which was Jim Crow and the KKK and all of those things. But they shouldn't. They shouldn't feel that guilt because they are not responsible. It's not something that they did. But I remember feeling that. I remember feeling the shame and the guilt of that. I remember feeling the shame and the guilt of being a white person, because white people by any other ethnicity, forget whether you're Italian or Polish or Hungarian or Irish or English or whatever, you're just white. You're just the obligatory white. And I remember feeling that guilt. So I sort of understand also the sense of ignorance, and the sense, whether it's willful ignorance or unwillful ignorance. But my point being is that people think and feel differently about any number of topics. It doesn't mean we should demonize and dehumanize each other. But the other thing I find astonishing, the other thing that kind of blows my mind, is I can understand why it's hard to not potentially be more so on the left. When, if you have standard issue cable television with your standard issue mainstream networks like your ABC, NBC, CBS, etc., most, if not all of those, seem to have a bit of a left from center agenda. In some cases, I would probably go as far as to say, yes, left wing, because some of the things that are being pushed and presented, I think, are a bit extreme, and thus necessitating the proper use of wing as a way of using coded language to infer extremism. And if that is considered part of your normal, then it's also considered a sense of indoctrination. And my point to that is, I'm typically overwhelmed at the utter hypocrisy. And some of the commentators I listen to who are a bit less extreme, for a while there, I was really indulging in, I guess, some right-wing punditry where it was probably a little bit more on the extreme side. Case in point, let's say Steven Crowder. He may not want to use the word extreme. He may not want to label himself as an extremist, but as somebody who is Christian and pro-life and all that, and somebody who sells merchandise that says fight like hell, I've got nothing against him. I'm not bad-mouthing him. I'm not trying to gaslight him or anything, but he's probably closer to what I would call extreme than anything else. Lately I found myself listening to people more like Tim Pool and Patrick Bet-David, where it's kind of like, you know, a strike is a strike, a ball is a ball, grass is green, water's wet, you know, common sense is common sense, where they're not overly attached to anything in particular, but they like to see the world for what it is and call things out for what it is. Case in point, prior to former President Barack Obama, positions like the president were fair game. Any and all comedians, whether they're late night television show hosts or whatnot, the president was pretty much fair game to get picked on. And then President Obama gets elected, and instead of being elected as like an individual, it was more like the election of a movement, where because of his physical appearance, it became more of a social and socio-political movement where for the most part he was essentially off limits. Hardly anybody ever bad-mouthed him or said anything about him because it was considered bad form, and therefore because of it, it was almost like he got this blind support, this instant faith, almost like messianic in a sense, where, you know, it just sort of changed the landscape. And then in comes Trump, who's essentially the exact opposite, still a movement by itself, but the opposite. And the only reason I kind of took up favor with him is when all these damn celebrities who were clearly on the left, were clearly disciples of Obama, started trying to tell me how to vote, started to try to tell me how the world's supposed to be. Like, no, there's no way in hell. The American people don't have a voice. The American people shouldn't have a choice. It shouldn't be this way. And I'm like, fuck you. I earned the goddamn right to vote. You know, I fought for the right to vote. I'm going to vote however the fuck I want. And quite frankly, when Hillary was the chosen candidate of the Democratic Party, it made that decision that much easier. And in my opinion, same with Biden. But for whatever reason, Trump, for, you know, whatever reason you want to, you know, use as your excuse, somehow lost an election. And again, I don't want to go down that path, but both candidates received the most votes out of any other presidential candidate in U.S. history. Between the two of them, they both received individually the most votes other than any other candidate in U.S. history. But yet, due to the shenanigans and jackassery that took place in several locations that should not have happened, mysteriously, Biden won. I don't know that Trump would have won otherwise. I don't know how many votes were, you know, the result of those shenanigans, but there's plenty of proof to suggest that there were some voting irregularities in several places. I don't know what they had, what an effect they had on the results, but there were some voting irregularities. Uh, that being said, God, I say that a lot, don't I? I use that phrase quite a bit. Tim Pool and Patrick Bet-David tend to call things, kind of down the middle. Neither one of them are a card-carrying Republican, but I don't think they would call themselves Democrats. Most recently, Tim Pool did a podcast where he was talking about the new Civil War movie, and I apologize if I spoil it, although I've never seen it or haven't seen it. According to Tim Pool and his panel, it's essentially a pro-Democrat Party movie. It's an anti-Trump film. The presidential figure is supposed to represent President Trump, and he's essentially killed by the quote-unquote pseudonym for Antifa. So instead of calling it Antifa, it's something else, and they kill the president. So in Tim Pool's view of this movie, it's a anti-Trump, pro-Antifa, pro-left-wing sort of propaganda movie, and that seems fair and accurate because, as I was discussing it earlier, it's interesting how there's no centrist media. There's no media that is not, in the pocket of or aligned with any particular political affiliation. They all are. But the overwhelming majority of them, whether it's social media, whether it's mainstream media, whether it's Hollywood, is all on the left. And they're no longer hiding. They're no longer, trying to pretend like this isn't happening. The equivalent being, for anybody who's seen The Wizard of Oz, it's like there is no curtain. You can physically see him. He's facing you, and yet he's operating the device at the same time that projects the wizard. So there's no hiding it. It'd be like a magician, doing tricks, but not trying to disguise how he pulls the tricks off. And I find that to be fascinating. I find that to be peculiar. Like, could you at least pretend? Could you at least, I don't know, try to be discreet? But they're not even being discreet anymore. It's like, yep, we're on this side of politics. This is how we lean. This is how we think the world should be, and it just blows my mind. But it's not necessarily what I think. I want to hear what you think. I'm not a big channel. I average maybe 2 or 3 views per video. So I don't really care how many people watch my channel. I'm not in this for money. I have a job. In fact, yep, I got to get ready for that job here soon enough. It's also why I don't have a big production. I don't take time to edit these videos. I don't take time to do all sorts of crazy cool stuff with them. They're just raw. But the point is, I'm trying to initiate conversation. I'm trying to provide the opportunity for us to converse, whether we agree, whether we disagree, whether we see things differently, because I believe we need to see each other more. We need to interact with each other more, even if it means through this virtual environment. And we need to not demonize and dehumanize. A couple years ago, before I end this, I'll tell you a quick story. I met somebody with false intentions. This person claimed that they wanted to have dialogue. Excuse me. This person claimed that they wanted to openly and freely discuss things, and that wasn't the case. They wanted to try and indoctrinate me. They wanted to try to push their agenda. They wanted to try and basically convert me. They were not interested in the fact that other people could have a difference in opinion, and because I'm a heterosexual Caucasian male, I guess cisgendered is the other term, because I don't buy into these pronoun things, and I don't buy into these transsexual things, at least not in the sense that the third decade of the 21st century would like you to. I'm apparently just this devil person. And they were recruiting other people to my channel for the sole purpose of bad-mouthing me, demonizing and dehumanizing me, which just, in my personal opinion, demonstrates and represents their ignorance. their level of immaturity, and their level of worthlessness. People like that have squandered the gift of life and are utterly worthless. Oh, I'm a person of color, therefore I'm entitled to all this. No, you're entitled to what the fuck you've earned. You're entitled to the sum total of your actions. The color of your skin should have no bearing or no impact whatsoever on the content of your character and your capabilities. Either you can do something or you can't. It's not because of your skin color. All right? So, whatever the case, I want to hear from you. That's kind of the purpose of this channel, is to try to create some dialogue, to try to create the opportunity to have discussions, whether we agree or disagree. All right? And if you do, I promise I will read and respond to your comments on camera. All right? And I would appreciate it if you did. And if you do, you're awesome. Until next time, stay safe.